All right, you guys. Well, it is noon, so we will get rolling here with day two of the Hashimoto's Breakthrough Week. Um, I got too excited yesterday. I was having fun going through all of the information and everything like that. But I did want to mention, um, I talked a little bit about the special offer for working with me that I was going to be presenting to you guys later in this week. And I just wanted to give some additional details there. What we do is on Thursday, we have what's called a breakout or an offer room where people who are interested in potentially working with me, we can go into that Zoom meeting and we can just talk about the details and make sure that things are the right fit for you. But because of kind of where I'm at in my practice and because of my knowledge base and the things I know I work well with, I'm very, very particular about kind of who I work with because I want to make sure I'm working with people who I'm going to be able to help them and help you the most. So we just want to kind of work through that process together. But part of that process is there will be an application, and that application will be available Wednesday morning. You'll get an email that is sent out to you. And if you're still on the fence, you're not sure, again, as I said yesterday, I'm not going to convince anyone to work with me. I want it to be a good fit for everybody. But even if you're still not sure and you just want to hear what the offer is, I would really encourage you to fill out that application and you can just join us on Thursday right after we do the live training. But yeah, there's no commitment or anything that comes from filling out the application. So day two is a little bit of an expansion on day one. We're going to be going over some more principles today, more things that are really key for us to understanding Hashimoto's. And as we do work through the week, we're going to get a little bit, we're going to kind of transition from principles into more strategies and things that we can be doing. We do have a little bit of strategies today as well. But the focus today is on why normal TSH does not mean that you feel normal. I think for a lot of you guys, you've been into the doctor's office, you've gotten your TSH checked, they've told you that it looks good, but you will say, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense because I'm not feeling good. So we're going to explain why that is. So to quickly recap, I think everyone was either on the call yesterday or was able to grab the replay. But just to recap day one, the big take-home points for you were that not all causes of hypothyroidism are the same. Hypothyroidism just means low functioning thyroid, low functioning thyroid hormone. And that could be, due to iodine deficiencies. That could be due to medication interactions. That could be due to, we talked today on the VIP, low iron can contribute to some of those problems. So there's a number of different reasons, and Hashimoto's is one potential cause of hypothyroidism with its own characteristics and its own needs. As we take that step one further, or that one more step further, Hashimoto's is an immune problem first, not necessarily a thyroid problem. So if we want to be able to get our symptoms under control, get control of our life back, then we need to make sure that we are focused on supporting our immune system first. Now, before we do dive into some of the information today, you guys can tell I took a lot of time on this slide here, but I did want to make a little reminder to myself to just thank you guys. I know I said it yesterday, but I was thinking about it a bunch last night too. Your guys' questions yesterday were so good. I could tell that you're being, so very thoughtful about everything. And I know that with the breakout week, you guys only paid $20 to be here, but I also know that for a lot of you guys dealing with the symptoms that you deal with, it's not just the $20, it's the time commitment. You guys all have busy lives, families, work that you're involved in. And it's the effort that you have to make with your symptoms. And so I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend it with me. And I'm very proud of you guys for putting in that effort. Now, with that said, even though this is only a $20 course, what I've poured into this is tens and tens of thousands of dollars of continuing education, again, a decade of working with people who have Hashimoto's, And I've really tried to, make that as applicable as possible. But my point is that I'm taking it very, very seriously. And I appreciate you guys for also taking it very seriously. Because again, I know that sometimes, and I think Toby, you and I talked about it yesterday, it's like when we don't have the energy, then we're asking ourselves to do something else. Like it's a little bit scary to do that. And I was talking the other day with one of my patients. Her name is Bonet, and we were kind of talking about like taking that first step with things, and that's what you guys are doing this week. But Bonet's story, she's a super cool gal. I think a lot of you guys would really kick on with her very well. But she had been going to her doctors for years, and just like we're going to really talk about today, her TSH was normal the whole time. She had these really, really sky high TPO antibodies where sometimes it was coming back. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's a point where labs will just say greater than 2000. So, meaning they're not going to
Mm.
measure the antibodies anymore. They're just like, okay, yeah, they're really, really high. So, we're not going to pay attention to them. But what was going on is her doctors said, well, number one, those antibodies don't matter. So it's a little bit like we talked about yesterday with Teresa, where her doctor is like, oh, this is interesting, an interesting academic finding, but it doesn't mean anything. And even if it did mean anything, her doctors were saying, well, there's nothing you can do to lower those antibodies. So, don't stress about it. And she was like, "Well, I'm feeling awful, so I'm stressed about it." And as you guys know, when we learned yesterday, that those antibody levels are directly correlated to a lot of the symptoms that you're feeling, right? So when I met with Bonet, she was, going through this process, trying to address a lot of her fatigue, trying to address a lot of her joint pain. And I told her that, actually we can do things to help these antibodies get better, help you to feel better. And she kind of thought, that sounds good, but it almost sounds a little bit too good to be true. And although she didn't feel like she had made a lot of progress with her doctor, she still trusted him. They had a pretty good relationship. And so she decided to not work with me at that time. It wasn't the right fit at that time. Well, fast forward the summer before her and I eventually did work together. She had gone on a trip with her family. They had gone to Disneyland. And when they got there, she realized after a couple hours that she was going to have to use the mobility scooter to get around the park because her joint pain was so bad. And if you guys knew Bonet, she is like, again, she's kind of a pistol. I like her a lot. But she's very much a go-getter. She's very like, she kind of keeps her husband and her son, who's like 6'6", she keeps them in check. She's a big part of her community. And so having to use that mobility scooter was really, really difficult for her because she felt embarrassed in front of her family. She felt embarrassed just being out in the park like that. And that was all a reflection of the fact that her doctors had not provided her with the understanding that that inflammation and the immune system was what was really driving her symptoms. And we talked a little bit about it with regards to the exercise. We shouldn't feel worse with exercise. Well, at that point, her body was already so inflamed that all of her tissues, her joints, her muscles, they were already super sensitive, already super painful. And when she started to do a little bit more, because her body couldn't tolerate it, those pain levels got way, way worse. So she then came back around, met with me again because she knew this was something that could not go on. And after just under 2 years of working together, she then went on a trip to Europe with her family, and she was walking 10 to 15 miles every day, and she was able to do it without problem. And so, what Bonet had told when we were talking the other day, what she told me was that the thing that frustrated her the most wasn't like the financial investment that she made. And she eventually had invested about $30,000 into her care, which she said was felt cheap to her because she looked back and she realized that she had probably spent twice as much in the years leading up to the care that she got because of all the doctor's visits, because of the specialists she saw, because of the medication she was spending money on, and they had her on a bunch of different things, the supplements that she was buying, and she had to her and her husband run a shop together, she had to dial back her hours. And so that was kind of hurting her financially as well. And she calculated that in. But it wasn't that that was so much of a stressor for her. It was the time that she missed out on. And so, just like we talked about yesterday, missing out on those memories with our families, and we talked a little bit to Kim about canceling the Dominican Republic trip, and by all means, we got to help her to get that scheduled sooner rather than later, get her feeling better for that. I talked a little bit about the moments with my son and those types of things, and she was like, I can't believe I waited another year to get this stuff right. But that all comes back to, you guys, I see you guys put in the work. When we talk, I know all the changes that you've been making, everything like that. And I said yesterday, you guys are closer than you think, but I just want to commend you because again, this week, you guys are taking a step closer to your goals. I know the information we go over this week is going to be really helpful for you, but I also know that sometimes it can be scary doing this sort of stuff. So I appreciate you guys so much. And, thank you again for all of that. So again, as we know, if TSH was the answer to everything, you wouldn't still feel exhausted and be symptomatic, right? It would be nice if TSH meant that we felt perfect because a lot of us would have perfect TSH and be feeling perfect. But the reason why this is such a problem for us is because when it comes to TSH, TSH is a proxy for how much thyroid hormone is in our body, or what is the amount of T4 and T3 that is present in our system. Okay. So, as you guys now know, TSH is that hormone that our brain releases to either dial up the stimulation of the thyroid to produce more thyroid hormone or to calm it down and produce less thyroid hormone because normally we are always adjusting those things based on demand. So the reason that our doctors use TSH is because the assumption is if you have an increase in TSH, that must mean that your thyroid is struggling and you're not making enough T4. And therefore, if you're not making enough T4, if you don't have enough thyroid hormone, then you are going to have low thyroid symptoms. So if we can fix the TSH, that suggests that we have now normalized the T4 and therefore we have normalized your symptoms. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. The problem is, what if our TSH is all over the place and we can never get it right? What if our TSH is always normal and we continue to feel poorly? The reason for that is because we are focusing on the amount rather than, as we'll talk about here in a second, the utilization of that hormone. And there's a big difference there. So as I was just I kind of laid this out for us, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday too, but our thyroid pathway all starts with our brain. So our brain, again, is monitoring thyroid hormone levels in the body, and it is making adjustments to TSH based on those changes in those levels. TSH then binds with our thyroid gland. Our thyroid gland then releases T4 and T3. Those hormones then bind with all of the cells in our body, just about all of them. I'd hate to be inaccurate with what I was saying. Red blood cells don't use thyroid hormone, but just about everything else uses thyroid hormone. And the reason every cell in our body needs thyroid hormone is because every cell needs energy. Every cell has a metabolism. Every cell has a specific job to do. So the reason why symptoms can be so widespread when it comes to Hashimoto's and thyroid conditions is because this isn't just a thyroid problem. It's not just an immune problem. It's a systemic problem because every cell, every cellular system needs that thyroid input. So sometimes the way I describe it is you can think of thyroid hormone like the gas pedal. It makes things go. And if we don't have that gas pedal, then I think I said this yesterday, a neuron in our brain that needs thyroid hormone doesn't function as well. So maybe our memory isn't as good or our brain fog is worse. Maybe that cell is in our stomach and we're not producing as much stomach acid, so we don't break down food as well as we should. Maybe this cell is in our small intestine or our large intestine, and the motility has changed for us. We don't move food along as efficiently as we possibly could. So any system in the body can be affected by these changes. And usually the ones that we see that show up for us, again, they're the most metabolically active, so they're sensitive to it. And then it's a combination of kind of who we are and what our health history looks like, where maybe we had a long-term usage of birth control pills, and now hormones tend to be more of an issue for us. Or we were on a lot of antibiotics because we had different types of infections as a kid. Now our gut has been changed because of that. So you can see how, again, these different flavors of Hashimoto's start to present itself based on your health history. But we have this kind of full pathway from top to bottom. And the key is that we make sure the cells get what they need. That way they can do their job. Is that making sense to everyone? Okay. But here is the big kicker, and here is kind of our critical take-home point for today. As we talked about yesterday, Hashimoto's can lead to so much damage that our thyroid gland cannot make enough thyroid hormone. So it can decrease the amount of thyroid hormone in our body. But what did we also say? We said that the reason why our thyroid starts to struggle is because of the antibody activity, which damages the cells in our thyroid, leading to an autoimmune injury. Now, because our thyroid is a systemic gland, that inflammation, I think we used the example of a sprained ankle. When we sprain our ankle, the inflammation is local to the joint and the tissues associated with that ankle. And we can see that inflammation because it's red and swollen and hot and painful. These are all signs of inflammation. But with our thyroid, number one, a lot of times we don't always see that inflammation. But number two, instead of that inflammation being local to the ankle, because this is a systemic organ, a systemic gland, this inflammation then becomes systemic as well. Okay? When that happens, it affects our body on a cellular level. And that leads to an inability or an inefficiency of our cells and their ability to bind thyroid hormone. So you can have all the thyroid hormone in the world, but if there's something blocking that hormone from getting to the cells, if that inflammation is so significant in our body, then it doesn't matter how much thyroid hormone you have because the cell isn't going to be able to get it. When that happens, even though, what is our TSH doing? It's a reflection of our brain checking these levels. So these are both normal for us. Even though these are normal for us, our cellular metabolism starts to go downhill. We start to become symptomatic in all these different areas because, again, we're not focusing on the immune system. We're not recognizing the inflammation that is present in our body, and that leads to these cellular changes. So to say it just a little bit differently, when it comes to Hashimoto's, again, yes, we can have problems with the amount. Over time, it can impair hormone production. But the bigger issue is that we do not have good thyroid hormone utilization. So I think about it kind of like a lock and key. And we can think about unlocking the lock or opening the lock as opening your metabolism or starting your metabolism. That's the end goal that we want for all of our cells, because when our metabolism is working appropriately, when we're producing and using energy appropriately, that's kind of what our metabolism is at a baseline, then cells can do their job. They can have normal function. So we need that last step. And to unlock it, we have thyroid hormone, this key. And that specific key has a specific fit to the key lock, And when it's functioning normally, we can easily insert that key and open the lock. Okay? However, when we have inflammation, that inflammation is like, again, it's blocking. It's like gunk or gum that's stuffed into that keyhole. So even though you might have the key, even though you might have thyroid hormone, whether that's from your normal production of your gland or if it's from taking a medication, either one, you have that key, but you cannot put it in the lock. It really doesn't matter that you have the key. I mean, that's important too, but if you can't put it in the lock and you can't unlock the lock, that's the goal. That's the thing that you need. You need that final step. And if you're being blocked right before that final step, you are going to be symptomatic. So when we think about this kind of in the way that most doctors practice, a lot of doctors are just checking to see if you have the key. What's your TSH look like? It's good? Oh, your T4 must be fine. Looks like you have the key, therefore your body must be fine. But we know with Hashimoto's being a specific cause of hypothyroidism, being associated with inflammation and cell damage and all these other things, yes, like I said, having the key is good, but because of that inflammation, we can now no longer utilize that hormone in a way that is effective and healthy for our body. Is that making sense to everyone? Does anyone have questions about that at all? Okay. So just to highlight that point a little bit further, what is the difference in symptoms if we are low on thyroid hormone or if we can't use it? Anyone have any thoughts? Jackie has a question. So the inflammation would need to be removed in order for it to connect and work properly. That's exactly right. Yeah. Just like any other blockage or inefficiency in our life, if we want to make sure that that process is working appropriately for us, we need to remove the impediment. And inflammation is that impediment. But the answer to the question of what's the difference, Toby kind of looked like she was typing. I wasn't sure. Again, Conley is marinating, thinking about things very well, but the answer is that the symptoms are the same. So as I kind of continue to highlight and emphasize, what we need is the key to open the lock. And if we can't do that, it doesn't matter if the issue is at the beginning of the process, the issue is at the end of the process. If we can't get that end result, then our metabolism is going to suffer and we are going to become symptomatic because of that. And I think this is something that's really, really critical for us in a couple of different ways. So this is why when we assess things appropriately, we should be looking at every single step. I know my diagram today was a little bit simplified, but we should really be looking at every single step along that thyroid pathway to see if there's any breakdowns. Can our brain function properly and drive the proper amount of TSH release? Sometimes people have neurological conditions or brain injuries or things like that that can change the brain's ability to produce TSH. So some people have problems with their thyroid just because that thyroid isn't being stimulated properly, for example. Sometimes we can have problems with the thyroid itself because of Hashimoto's, because of nutrient deficiencies, because of all these things that we mentioned. Sometimes we can't convert T4 into T3. And of course, as I'm saying, sometimes we can't bind that hormone at the cellular level. But none of us are the textbooks. We often have problems in multiple areas. And so we just want to be as holistic as possible when we look at these things to, again, make sure we're supporting those proper areas that are specific to our needs, because that is going to get us the best results. And the other thing, why it's so important for us to kind of understand this concept is I think a lot of times people will be in like this, again, like more of this medical world. That's our first stop when we're having a lot of these problems. And their model is what? It's amount. Do you have enough? And when that doesn't work for us, because there's more to it than that, very simply, a lot of times we start to move into more of the holistic world, which can be helpful. But there's a lot of holistic practitioners that like to say that they're going to approach things differently than the standard model. But then in reality, what they do is they're doing the same thing with a different tool, essentially. So, like, for example, and not to, this may or may not be related, but Conley brought up yesterday that she was utilizing some iodine to help her with her symptoms. And she's already been taking some medication for both T4 and both T3. Sorry for putting you on the spot, Conley. But the reason why I think that's a good thing for us to conceptualize is because what is the point of the iodine? The reason someone recommended that iodine, and not just to Conley, to many, many people, is because thyroid hormone requires iodine. I said yesterday that T4 is a thyroglobulin protein, a thyroglobulin backbone with 4 iodine units bound to it. That's what creates T4. So we think sometimes, oh, we're getting this alternative approach. We're thinking about it differently. Oh, yeah, the medication wasn't working. My TSH was good, but actually it's this iodine thing. Well, sure, some people can be deficient in iodine, but if you're deficient in iodine, usually your T4 levels start to drop because it is a key factor that allows you to make T4, right? So if you don't have the resources and substrates to make something, you're not going to be able to make it. And in that case, your brain would say, uh-oh, we're not making enough T4. I'm going to increase TSH. So the reason, my point is this, the reason why we would use iodine is because we're trying to boost the amount of hormone in our system. But the reason so many people are struggling isn't because they're having an amount problem, or maybe their amount problem has already been addressed by the medication that they're taking. And we just think that we need more and more thyroid hormone to fix our low thyroid symptoms. In reality, your body has enough, it just can't use it. And I also kind of touched on that yesterday with, people these days are talking about, oh, well, maybe we can take T2 substrate to then make more T4. Or if you look at any sort of like thyroid boosting supplement out there, or glandulars or whatever it might be, again, there can be a time and place for this stuff, but all of these things are coming back to this principle of amount. And they're never looking at the inflammation, the immune function, the way our body utilizes this hormone. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. I know, again, that's a little bit of a shift. And we should probably mention at some point that iodine, we have to be very, very careful with it. With Hashimoto's, generally speaking, it is contraindicated. So for those of you who are taking a lot of supplements, we want to make sure that we're checking that we're not getting too much iodine from different supplements because those can come along with thyroid stimulating kind of packages. It can make symptoms worse because it increases the activity of a thyroid gland that already isn't working very well. So when it comes to kind of this shift, and Jackie asked, like, okay, we have to manage our inflammation. The question becomes, what should we be asking? And the answer to that is we need to start looking at the timing and the pattern of our symptoms. Now, sometimes this can feel random to people, but I can guarantee you that there is always a cause that will change the way that your immune system is responding and change the amount of inflammation that is present in your body at any given time. But because our life is busy, oftentimes it can be difficult to tease that out. So tracking when our symptoms are present, tracking the severity of those symptoms can be very, very helpful to determining what is changing these things. Said another way, we can pay attention to what makes us feel better and what makes us feel worse. And I think both of those are important to think about because sometimes I'll talk to people and they'll say, you know what, I feel cruddy all the time, so nothing makes me feel better. I hear that a lot. Nothing makes me feel better. And that could be that could be very true. But usually there are also times where someone might feel worse, My fatigue is worse today. My joint pain is worse today. My headaches are worse today. I've noticed this last couple weeks, my hair loss is worse. So if your symptoms have the ability to change better or worse, to me, that tells me that there's still variability in the system and that the system can still, on a positive note, bounce back. So if we can have some days that are better than maybe our worst days, then why can't we get that better than still from that point? And what we want to be able to do is look at the timing and pattern and the changes of our symptoms, look at what may have contributed to that, to then start harnessing things that can be supportive to us, that can reduce our inflammation, and manage the things that are then making our symptoms worse. So, Toby and Anne-Marie and I talked today, we were talking about sleep and cortisol rhythms and those types of things. For example, we might say, hey, if I'm having a morning where I am waking up at 3 a.m. and I cannot fall back asleep for the rest of the night, what do my symptoms look like the next day? Does that have a big impact on me? Does that not? But that takes us to our next question we want to ask is, what are the things that have the biggest impact on our symptoms? So in the world of Hashimoto's, in the world of autoimmunity, we all know that there are a million different recommendations and a million different things that you could be doing, right? And I'm not saying that any of those things are bad. I was watching someone the other day and they're like, you need to get rid of every single bit of plastic in your house. And then I saw a news report that said plastic is in like the dishwasher pods. And I was like, well, I hope she's changed her dishwasher pods because that was a spot that I didn't really expect it. And is it possible that reducing our plastic load is a good idea? Yeah, I would argue that sounds like a great idea. But is that the thing that is most contributing to our symptoms? It may or may not. You know, Anne-Marie and I were chatting a little bit over email, and we are talking about how she reacts to potatoes. And for some people, they might have certain food reactions that are maybe mild in nature. And they'll say, I get a little bit of stomach grumbling, no big deal. But some people can have very, very serious reactions to certain foods. And that would be something that we would then want to highlight as part of this is something that makes a big difference in how I feel. And I want to make sure it's at the forefront of my care. And again, Conley and I were talking, she's been doing a lot of different things, doing more of a kind of a ketovore approach, and she's, again, incorporating different medications, supplements, whatnot. She also mentioned that she had removed her Apple Watch because of the EMFs associated with it. Now, I have people who have had significant head injuries, for example, that I've worked with in the past, who are very sensitive to changes in electromagnetic field. And they notice when they have a Wi-Fi router in their bedroom. So for them, taking that out can make a big change. But for you guys, and I don't know if it made a big difference for Conley or not, it may or may not be a big deal. My point is that we can get kind of caught up in some of that minutia sometimes where we're trying to do all these things that can in general be good. But if we can really, really pay attention to our symptoms, to the timing, to what is changing them and what is clearly changing them, it shouldn't be kind of a question of like maybe, maybe not. That is going to bear us the most fruit in our ability to move forward, in our ability to heal, because I can guarantee you that when you are feeling better, you are in some capacity, whether you know it or not, managing those inflammation levels better. So as you are tracking the timing and pattern of your symptoms, the other thing that you want to do is track the frequency and the severity of the symptoms that you have as you continue to execute on your plan. What I mean by this, and we talked a little bit about this in VIP, is that the early stages with, as you're starting to make changes, you might have, fatigue all the time. You might have joint pain all the time. You might have brain fog all the time. Your weight could be fluctuating, every single day, not improving in the way that we want it to. And as you start to identify those areas that are negatively or positively impacting you, and as you start to make changes on them, you want to pay attention to how the symptoms are responding. And in the beginning, sometimes there's going to be situations where you'll have a bad day or a bad stretch of days. But if we can take a good job of or do a good job of really understanding what our symptoms look like normally, it would be, it might be difficult in the moment, but you could be on board with the idea that if you're always having a particular symptom, if you're always feeling fatigued, but now 1 week out of the month you're not having fatigue, you'd say, wow, that's a 25% improvement. But at the same time, and I don't want you guys to feel this way, of course, I want you guys to get better. We have to recognize that 75% of the time, we're still having that symptom. And so that can be really kind of deflating to people. That can be really discouraging to people. But if we've tracked things appropriately, we'll notice that change. And what we want to be able to do, and I said to Toby and Anne-Marie, is we want to continue to build that progress kind of consistently over time. And suddenly that 25% can become 50%. Now at 50%, are we still having 50% of our days? Are they still difficult for us? Absolutely. But we're at such a different point than we were maybe a couple months ago, where fatigue was present for us all the time. So as we continue to push forward, symptoms will still be present as we heal, as we change those patterns. And I don't want that to be something that's discouraging to you. You want to execute on those things that have been helpful to you in the beginning. So use that contrast as evidence that change is possible and continue to utilize it to your benefit. So an example that I will, talk to people, and this kind of illustrates what I was just talking about, but I'll throw some labs in there as well. Oftentimes when we're making changes, again, it can seem like, am I really gaining ground here or not? Because I'm still having days where I don't feel very well. Well, we always want to bring things back to how am I feeling? How am I progressing? And what are my labs looking like? All of these things together, we want to look at you as a whole person. And so whether it's the symptoms that we're feeling, I just use the example of fatigue, or maybe let's say someone has elevated inflammatory markers on their labs. Sometimes, we talked about C-reactive protein as being evidence of inflammation today in VIP. Less than 3 for the rest of the group, less than 3 is normal for C-reactive protein. Above 3 is an indicator that we have inflammation in our system. What if your CRP was 10 when you first got it checked, when you're having a lot of your symptoms? And you're having, all the things that we know. We're having a lot of fatigue, joint pain, brain fog, etc. at that time. Well, as you start to make changes, as you identify the timing and patterns of what has been contributing to those symptoms, it is likely that you're going to see a change in the frequency and severity of your symptoms. And it's likely we're going to see a change in the inflammation on your blood labs. Maybe it's 3 months later and you're 50% better with your fatigue. And you go back and you get your labs drawn, and now your C-reactive protein isn't 10, but instead it's 5. Well, holy smokes, that's a massive improvement. That's such a good thing to see. It's very possible to see that during that time. But if you were to just look at that lab in isolation, if you were to just look at your symptoms in isolation, you would say, yeah, I'm still having a lot of fatigue. Yeah, I still have inflammation in my system. But the thing is that those symptoms and those labs are still above the threshold of what we consider normal, but it doesn't mean that change isn't occurring. So the example that I'll often provide to my clients and my patients is, think of it a little bit like an ice cube. And my apologies to my Ontario and Albertan friends who are here today for the use of Fahrenheit. They were like, what's the point of 32 degrees? That doesn't make any sense. So 32 degrees in the United States, that's freezing. For those who are not familiar. But as we're making these changes, our ice cube or our symptoms, our progress that we're trying to make, at 31 degrees, it's frozen. Well, a whole degree later at 32 degrees, it's still frozen. And we're not going to see that ice cube start to melt until we get to 33 degrees, until we break through that threshold and we start to see more of this real kind of transformative change start to occur. So this is why having an understanding of it's not just about amount, it's about how our body is utilizing it, but also it's that this inflammation that is present with our autoimmune condition, that change or that improvement requires progression over time. And sometimes it can be a little bit difficult for us, but we need to be aware that those changes are going on kind of underneath the hood. And we want to be able to track all of these things in concert with each other, because then it can give us that evidence and that feedback that yes, things are changing. Yes, I'm on the right track. And I need to continue to execute if I want to see that ice cube melt completely. So hopefully the thing that we can kind of all take away from today is, again, those standard labs, that TSH, that can look completely normal, but it doesn't mean that your cells are using thyroid hormone properly. And if that is the case, your fatigue, your symptoms at large, they are going to continue until you can address that utilization component. Now, as promised, I said as we kind of work through this week, we're going to transition from principle more into strategy and action steps. And tomorrow we're going to talk about why your nutrition is so critical for improving your Hashimoto's. And there's a number of different pieces to this, but we're going to focus in on some things that I think will be very, very valuable and helpful to you guys in terms of understanding exactly how that nutrition works with your system, how it can trigger your immune system, and how it can facilitate healing when done in the proper way. But again, hopefully today is your reminder that healing is possible. Your energy, your life, your quality of your life is worth fighting for. We just haven't been able to achieve that in these situations because we've been stuck, and I don't mean you guys, a lot of times it's your support, it's your provider, but we've been stuck on these things that are continuing to address this one finite aspect of your thyroid health, which is how much thyroid hormone you have, and that doesn't address the larger picture, which is so critical for how you feel and how you function on a daily basis. Okay, so homework for today, and again, really appreciate everyone submitting their homework yesterday. A lot of really, really great responses. Oh, Kim posted a question. Oh, I was like, hopefully that wasn't 30 minutes ago. I lost track of things. Real quick, I'll finish up with homework. So with homework, I want you guys to identify one thing in your life that changes how you feel for better or for worse. And the reason I want you to do this is because it's going to start getting you into that mindset, help you to start thinking like a detective so you can look at these different areas and assess different areas of your life in terms of what is being beneficial to you or not. Then I want you to also share one strategy that you've used in the past that has been helpful with your symptoms. I think this is good for you as an individual because it can kind of show us, okay, that was helpful before. Is that something I'm still using? Do I maybe need to modify that now? Oftentimes there can be different parts of our system that benefit from a little bit of continued activity or continued support. We talked a little bit with Kim yesterday during VIP where we know stress has played a role in her life in the past, and she had a couple stressful events recently, which have caused her symptoms to be more active for her. So that might be a situation where providing some extra support to those stress pathways could be really beneficial. Um, Anne Marie, we talked a little bit about how you were being really diligent with it when it comes to your nutrition. We didn't do the best maybe with reintroduction, but that is something that could be very helpful to you. So there's different ways that we can revisit those types of things. But I want you guys to help kind of isolate things that will be beneficial to you, but also of course, not everything is going to work for, what works for one person isn't going to work for everyone else. But I think this can create a little bit of dialogue around, giving some people some ideas and seeing what's been done and seeing what's been successful. And if you guys have questions for one another, certainly feel free feel free to ask. I think that's okay to say. But then Kim said, can you chat about electrolytes tomorrow, when to use, when not to use? I absolutely can do that. What a teaser for tomorrow. I know everyone was super excited for electrolytes. No, I'm joking, Kim. But yeah, I can, of course, talk about that. And I will make a note to do so. Then the other thing I will say is I got a couple questions about cholesterol. You know, Catherine, I think you had mentioned that, and then Akshay had asked about cholesterol. We didn't address it today in VIP because I felt like some of the people who wanted to hear about that weren't there. So I've kind of put that on save two. Again, you guys, I just want to make sure that you guys are getting your needs met, you're being supported properly. So if you have any questions, if you need anything specifically, just let me know. It would not be the first time that I've completely rewrote an entire training the night before because someone, asked it and someone else came in and we said, okay, we're going to do this differently. Once again, there's my contact information if you guys need anything. If you're having any issues with it, again, any of the links, if you need the replay sent your way, you can send me an email. I will get it to you. There again is my Instagram and my website if you need me. But any last questions from anyone, you can either, again, unmute or type them in the chat. Kim was so kind to offer answering that for tomorrow, but I'd be happy to answer anything quick to finish up today. Otherwise, you guys can give me the thumbs up. Catherine says good. Kim says good. Conley says good. Toby says good. All right, you guys. Jackie's on the dark mode right now. Anne-Marie says, can you go from being hypoglycemic to pre-diabetic? I said quick questions, not so whether someone, this is going to feel like a cliffhanger, hopefully it's not. Whether someone is hyperglycemic or hypoglycemic, both of those situations can lead to insulin resistance and therefore symptoms associated with our blood sugar. So usually with low hypoglycemia, what can happen is we'll get these big fluctuations. And what you'll see on labs is their glucose might be low, but you'll see like their triglycerides are elevated or their insulin levels are elevated. Cholesterol levels can be elevated as a result of that. And so, yeah, so yes, you could have someone just directly go from a hypoglycemic to a pre-diabetic state. That could happen. But generally speaking, what is happening is they are getting insulin resistance symptoms as a result of the hypoglycemia, not necessary, and that will mimic pre-diabetic or high blood sugar, but it's a different cause, which means that the way we go after it is different. So yeah. Any other questions, you guys? I know everyone, I won't make you all give thumbs up again. So, all right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for attending today. It was great to see everyone's faces. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate all the engagement and the thoughtfulness again. I will once again post the replay as soon as I can get it processed from Zoom and get it edited up for you guys. I'll post the homework prompt as well in the Facebook group, so you have that. As I said, if there's anything else you need from me before tomorrow, let me know. But the application for the breakout room will be coming tomorrow morning to you guys. And then I'm just super excited to talk about nutrition tomorrow because I mean, I love it. It's what I do. There's so many different aspects to it, and I think it's so fun. And when we can really tailor it to what you guys need, it can be very, very transformative. So everyone have a fantastic Tuesday. Toby, hopefully we didn't put you to sleep today. The rest of you guys, get some rest, relax, enjoy yourself, and I will see you tomorrow.